In a recent video, I talked about the importance of free speech on college campuses. And in that video, I mentioned humility. I want to spend this video today talking about this particular virtue because I think it is really important. And I want to explain why, okay? So when I say humility, in this context, I mean epistemic humility, okay? Epistemic means relating to our knowledge, okay? So epistemic humility is basically realizing that we are imperfect knowers, okay? And appreciating the fact that we are imperfect knowers. And importantly, a person who practices epistemic humility acknowledges and appreciates the fact that knowledge is difficult to attain. So let's take COVID as an example, right? And specifically, the claim that natural immunity is just as good or better than vaccines. So this is a scientific claim, right? And scientific claims can be supported, right, through experimentation, right, and through study groups, control groups, etc. And then scientists publish a paper, okay? Now, I think there are a number of difficulties for the average person to actually attain scientific knowledge, given this process, okay? First, people don't read peer-reviewed academic papers, right? Very, very few people actually do that. They get their sources from trusted news sites or trusted news pundits, okay? So they're one step removed from the actual paper, right? Or maybe multiple steps removed from the actual paper, okay? Second, these studies can be done better or worse, right? There are good ways to conduct studies and there are bad ways to conduct studies. So a person may read a news headline that says, oh, there's evidence that suggests natural immunity is better than vaccines. Well, they may not actually be able to understand that this particular study was flawed, okay? And the person who works with the news site isn't trained to understand the nuances of these studies and to judge whether or not this study is good or bad, okay? So that's like another layer of difficulty. So I'm one of those very few people who actually look at academic studies, okay? But because science is outside of my area of expertise, I honestly don't understand a lot of what they're saying, right? It's very technical. I don't understand the methodology. I don't understand the statistics, right? It's very hard for me to discover what the truth is, right? Because I'll find one study that supports one conclusion, but then another study that supports another conclusion. So, what do I do with that, right? I'm left in this position of ignorance, right? Which is kind of like the original position that I was in. So this is to show that knowledge is difficult to attain, right? It is difficult to attain. It's difficult because the processes are actually hard to attain, right? Like the scientific method is difficult, right? You actually have to do it and do it well. And that takes time and that takes money and that takes, brains, that takes teamwork, right? And then it's difficult because you have to actually understand what the results are, right? Which most people really don't. So they have to rely on other people who may or may not be experts in the field. All right, so if you are to practice epistemic humility, what does that actually look like? I think what that looks like is just saying that you don't know for the vast majority of important topics, right? Like if somebody asks you, how much humans are contributing to climate change, right? Maybe the correct answer, the best answer for you is, I don't know. If there are experts who disagree over a claim and you are not one of those experts, I think it's wise to kind of just take a step back and not be so confident that your opinion is true, okay? Generally, I think it's good for your confidence in your opinion to correlate with how much you know about the topic. So the more that you know about the topic, the more I think it's appropriate for you to be confident in your position. Unfortunately, oftentimes the opposite happens, right? There's an inverse correlation, right? The less somebody knows about the topic, the more confident they are. I would say that one of the benefits of going to grad school is that it's a humbling experience, right? I was more confident in my beliefs at the beginning of grad school than at the end of grad school for a lot of topics, okay? And it's because you encounter other smart people who know a lot about whatever the subject is, and that makes you question yourself, right? That makes you hesitant to die on a particular hill. Related to that, I remember seeing this diagram that kind of showed what it meant to get a PhD. Okay. So there's a circle, okay? And this circle represents the entire collection of human knowledge, okay? And within this circle, there are smaller circles, okay? And for example, like elementary school, it's like a tiny circle in this big circle, right? And then middle school, high school, they're like bigger circles in this overall circle. When you're in college and major in something, your circle now is not completely round, right? There's like a little bump that is coming out because you know more about that particular field. Okay. And when you get a master's, that little bump pops out even more. Okay. And when you do a PhD, what happens is that there's a little bump that protrudes out of the overall body of human knowledge circle. Okay. It's like a little hill, right? And basically what that represents is that when you do a PhD, you have contributed to the entire collection of human knowledge. And that one tiny little area, okay? And that's what really doing a PhD entails. You are expanding human knowledge in that very tiny little area. And you spend years doing that, okay? That little bump is your contribution after years of study, okay? So that process, because it took so long and because it was so difficult, it's a humbling experience, right? And you come to appreciate how difficult knowledge is to attain. So, what are the benefits of being epistemically humble? I think there are a couple of benefits. One is that you come off as more likable, right? People generally don't like arrogance. People generally don't like somebody who is so confident in their position, especially when it's obvious that they don't really know what they're talking about. Okay. That would be a vice. People generally don't like vices. Okay. So that's one thing. The second benefit is that it makes it easier for you to attain the truth. Okay. And what I mean by that is the person who is very confident that they're right, they get defensive, right, when their position is challenged, and they dig in their heels. And that type of defensive disposition, I think, is not conducive to you actually changing your mind when the evidence or the logic guides you to a different conclusion. Okay. So I think in terms of attaining the truth, there's also a benefit. One of the things that I remember about COVID is that many people suddenly became epidemiologists and virologists, right? Many people suddenly became experts on how COVID spread and whether or not masks were effective, whether or not vaccines were effective. I think it's tempting, and I understand why people have strong opinions on things like that because it affects their lives. But again, I think ideally, what I would like to see is just people saying, I don't know, right? I don't know whether or not natural immunity is better than getting a vaccine, okay? I don't study that science. I don't understand those papers. So I'm going to let the scientists figure it out. And that's something that I want to stress, okay? It's okay not to have an opinion on something, right? Nobody's forcing you to take a side, right? You don't have to do that. It is okay to say that you don't know. In fact, I think a lot of people would appreciate the fact if other people said that they didn't know. Okay, I think I'm going to end it here. I hope you found it interesting, and I'll see you all next time.